Hey, Mama. So, you've heard me talk about the benefits of podcasting for your business often on this podcast. And so, this past year, I've experienced a lot of wins through my podcast. And so, in today's episode, I really wanted to highlight 4 ways your podcast can increase your visibility and elevate your business. Like I said, it's just been a pivotal part of my business and opening up doors of opportunity for me that I honestly did not imagine before I had my podcast. And so, just to kind of get your mind thinking, especially if you've been thinking about a podcast and starting one for your business, really highlighting the different ways that it can actually work for you and open you up to more opportunities to take your business further. So, let's get into today's episode. Hey, Mama. Welcome to the Mama Turned Mompreneur podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Singletary, a wife, mama of 2, and former virtual assistant turned podcast strategist and producer. This is the podcast for the mama who is burnt out trying to build her business on social media. You're tired of putting in so much time and energy marketing your business on social media, only to hear crickets and barely get any engagement on your posts. You don't have time to waste as a busy mama, and you need an effective way to generate leads for your business. Well, Mama, you're in the right place. On this podcast, I will be giving you the inside scoop on how to create a podcast that generates consistent leads for your business on autopilot, mixed in with some mompreneur hacks and tips for growing your business as a busy mama. So grab your coffee, your notebook and pen, put in those earbuds, and let's dive in. Okay, so I really just wanted to pull out 4 ways that your podcast can increase your visibility and elevate your business. Now, of course, it's not limited to these 4 things, but really just helping you to see different ways that your podcast actually can work for you and get your name out there without you having to actually be in these different rooms. So, the first way is that your podcast can really open you up to more speaking opportunities and other collaborations. So, if you think about it, we're recording your podcast, you are allowing people to see what it's like for you to speak, especially when you do solo episodes. It kind of gives people an idea of oh, okay, this is how she would be if she's speaking at a conference or different things like that. But also too, with the interviews, it kind of gives a feel for oh, okay, I could have her speak on a panel discussion and different things like that. So it really gives people an idea of your speaking abilities and the way you interact with other people in interviews, and really just demonstrate that expertise. So that is one way that it can open up these opportunities for you, because someone can listen to your podcast and say, hey, you know what? She would make a great speaker for my upcoming conference and different things like that. And so just having those people reach out to you because they're able to see what your speaking abilities are and really get a sense of what your expertise is. Another way that it can kind of open up opportunities for you is through different collaborations. So you guys have heard me talk about podcast swaps on here before. And honestly, podcast swaps are so amazing because when you're really intentional about the podcast host that you reach out to about doing a swap with, you can really ensure that you are getting in front of somebody's audience who matches your own audience, who contains your ideal listener, your ideal client. But another thing that I have found with doing podcast swaps is podcast hosts are a little more I don't want to say apt to say yes, or more open to, hurrying up and getting you on their podcast when you do a swap, in that it's benefiting the both of you guys. Now, as a disclaimer, I don't want you to think that you have to have a podcast in order to get podcast guest opportunities, because it's definitely not a requirement. However, it does work in your favor when you have a podcast and you guys are able to do a swap because it is benefiting you both. You're able to get in front of each other's audiences and leverage each other's audiences. Another thing is that when you interview guests on your podcast, you really can build such beautiful partnerships and collaborations. I have connected with so many amazing women on this podcast, and many of them have now come to see me as their go-to person for podcasting. I just recorded an interview today with someone, and after our interview, she, shared in her Instagram stories how she did an interview with me and that I'm the go-to person for podcasting. I did not ask her to do that at all. Literally, that was our first time actually meeting each other virtually, but it was such an amazing conversation and we were able to get to know each other so well. We even stayed on a little bit after the interview and chatted some more, but it really builds these beautiful partnerships and even too, it builds like such beautiful friendships too. I've connected and built friendships with some amazing women who've been guests on my podcast. But it really helps you develop like that referral partnership. So when these women are guests on my podcast, they become my go-to people for their niches. And just like I become their go-to person for podcasting. So you're able to build these collaborations and you will see like if somebody in their community is asking about something that you're an expert in, they're going to be like, hey, you need to go talk to so-and-so. So it really just builds a beautiful relationship and partnership. And you have to have that as an entrepreneur. In the online space, you cannot be a lone island. You have to build your network. You have to build relationships and connect with other people. That is one of the main ways that you are going to grow as a business owner and really get your name out there and have people, recommending you for different opportunities and everything. And so your podcast can make that possible for you because maybe these women you may have not even collaborated with outside of like doing a guest interview with them or something. So it really just helps you build that network without having to go to, networking events and different things like that. And then another thing is, which I kind of touched on this a little bit, but it really can open up those invitations for you to speak at different events. So I haven't announced this officially yet to my audience, but I was invited to speak at a mom podcaster conference next year in Nashville. And I'll be sending out or sharing more details about that a little bit later on in a future episode. But that was an opportunity that came through one of the women, Amanda Bennett. I recorded an interview with her and her interview will be coming out next month, but she saw me as like one of the go-to people when it comes to podcasting for your business. We connected through her group, the Mom Podcasters group, and then also in Kylie Kelly Spotlight Club. But she knew I had a podcast. She knows the amazing type of podcast content I create and everything. And so as she was planning this conference, she knew that like, oh, I need to ask Andrea to be, part of this, to come and speak at this conference. And so because I have my podcast and she's been able to get a feel for like who I am, my expertise and different things like that through my podcast content, I'm now going to be speaking at this amazing conference, which it has my ideal clients are going to be there at that conference. It is a conference for mom podcasters. And so it really just opens you up to such incredible opportunities that you probably don't even imagine. Because I honestly did not imagine that in April of next year, I will be going to Nashville to speak at a conference. I'm still blown away by that. So that is one of the ways that it really can increase your visibility and help you elevate your business. So you're getting your name out there more through your podcast content and then these opportunities that are going to come to you, but also too, you're going to be getting in front of your ideal clients, your ideal listeners. And so that's going to open up more opportunities for you in your business. The next thing with your podcast, and this is more so with really helping elevate your business, is that it really helps you establish your authority. So through those solo episodes, especially, but also you can do it through the interviews too. You're really able to demonstrate your expertise. Your solo episodes, you're planning out that content. You really can curate your content to speak to your ideal clients, to really demonstrate what you know, your knowledge, how you help your clients, how you support them. You can highlight your framework. There's so many different things that you can dive into in your solo episodes and really establish yourself as a thought leader in your niche. You can highlight how you do things differently. You can highlight the ways in which you have supported your clients to achieve, these different results and stuff. And so that is such an incredible way to get your name out there and really demonstrate your expertise. And the best part is that this is evergreen content. So new people coming into your world can go back and listen to those previous episodes and really learn about like who you are, what you do, how you support, and why you are the expert, why you are the go-to person in this niche, why they should be working with you. Now, back in episode 64, I talk all about how your podcast can really help build your authority. And I dive into the different ways you can use your podcast to do that. So go back and take a listen to that episode if you're really, want to learn how to effectively use your podcast to build your authority. Now, the third thing is that your podcast really can help build your community with the right people. I talk about this all the time. And the masterclass I did earlier this month, that's what I really broke down for them in that masterclass, was how to build your podcast audience with the right people. So one of the ways you can do that is through podcast SEO, really making sure that you are using the keywords that your ideal listener, your ideal client is searching in the podcast listening app, searching in Google, so that way you are coming up in the top results. You also will find that as you grow your podcast audience and you really get the right people in your audience, they're going to start sharing your content with others. So I have found that the amazing women who listen to my podcast, they start sharing my podcast with other people. They're like, hey, you want to learn about podcasting? You need to go listen to Andrea's podcast. And so you build such an incredible community with your podcast listeners. Now, I know that that can feel kind of like, ooh, that's a little stressful. Like that's high responsibility, because your audience, they are looking to you as the expert. And so you do have to be mindful of how you're presenting information and making sure that you aren't steering them in the wrong direction and different things like that. But it's such a beautiful thing in that you get to make such an incredible impact. You get to help so many people without necessarily leaving the comfort of your home. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about podcasting, is that I have listeners across the globe. I have listeners in countries and cities that I've never even stepped foot in, but they are getting the value I'm able to bring through this podcast. They're able to experience these incredible wins and start hitting their goals and, building the business of their dreams in a way that fits their current season of life. And so you're able to really reach the right people who need to hear your message, who need to listen to your content and everything, and just make such an incredible impact. And then it increases that visibility, because as you're impacting these listeners' lives, they are going to share about your podcast with others. And so getting your name out there even more and I've said this before, but like, there's just something about tuning into somebody's podcast each week. Like, you're in somebody's ears, and it's such an intimate thing in that, like, you're like, people will come to look at you as like being that friend that they are tuning into each week. And that's been a personal experience for me. Like, my favorite podcast that I tune into each week, it's like, okay, I'm catching up with my bestie this week. How is she going to get my life together this week? And so that's how it is. So it just builds just that community, and you get to really impact the right people, the people that you are called to. Okay, now the fourth way your podcast can, this is more so like elevate your business. And so it can simplify your entire funnel and marketing. So I've talked about this before, how my podcast is the top of my sales funnel. This is the main way that I grow my audience, that I get new people into my world. And I like to use my podcast because I'm not having to churn out a lot of content, like on Instagram. But also, too, I really like to leverage SEO. So that way, again, I'm getting the right people in my audience. And so I have it set up so that you guys come listen to the podcast, but I also have different ways that you can connect with me more. So that may be getting on my email list, or giving me a follow on Instagram, and we start talking, on Instagram in the DMs. So it's all part of my sales funnel, but the top of my sales funnel is my podcast. And I really like having it set up that way because, again, it's evergreen content. And so somebody can come find my podcast at any point. This is episode 103. So somebody may, through a Google search, come in at episode 58, but they have all these episodes that they can listen to and binge and really get to know me better. And by the time they reach episode 103, it's like, okay, I know I need to work with Andrea. Let me see what's the best way I can work with her. And your podcast can do that for you too. It's just such an incredible way to bring people in, but also nurture and convert them, because you have this curated content. And as you put out more and more episodes, you're giving more and more value. And so really just helping to nurture them and really helping them to see why they need your services, why they should be working with you, why you're the go-to person in your niche. Now, another thing related to more of like the marketing side of things is that your podcast can simplify your content creation, which is part of marketing. We got to create content to market our offers. Now, back in episode 58, I really highlight how, podcasting can simplify this for you as a mompreneur. And then back in episode 65, I interviewed Emily Aborn, who she shared some really great tips for repurposing your podcast content for other platforms. But as I've shared on the podcast before, like taking a large piece of content like your podcast, you are really able to break it up and use it across the platforms you're on. So I've talked about this before. It creates a cohesiveness in your messaging. It simplifies your content creation in that you're not having to go and reinvent the wheel. You just pull from your podcast content and you repurpose it for your email, for your social media, if you want to repurpose it into a blog, all these different things. So it just simplifies that content creation, which as a busy mama, we need that. You literally just have to plan your podcast content, and that's it. You're not having to plan your podcast content, then going to plan content for Instagram, then figuring out what you're going to email your list, then figuring out, what you're going to post over here, what you're going to create over here. You literally just have to map out your content for your podcast and then pull from those episodes and create content for the other platforms you're on. So simplifying that process. And one thing I just want to touch on here, because I've heard it from a lot of different moms and stuff, in that like, well, if I'm just using the same content across platforms, I'm repeating myself. People are going to find that boring and whatnot. I promise you that just because you posted this podcast episode and then repurpose that podcast episode to your email list. Not everybody is reading your content or hearing your podcast episodes at the same time. So it's not like, oh, she's just using the same thing everywhere. No, trust me, nobody is viewing all of your content like that. It really works more so in your favor in that, one, you don't know how each person in your audience best consumes content. So you have your people in your audience who, will listen to your podcast, but then you're going to have those people who maybe they consume content better through reading your email or reading your blog. Or, those people who they really like watching your stories, and so they consume the content better that way. So you have to remember that people consume and learn in different ways. And so one, that is like one thing to consider, but also two, people have to hear the same message over and over again before they actually take action. So you having the same message across platforms, it's going to ensure that people are hearing it at different points, and you're going to see those conversions and that they're going to realize like, okay, this is what I need. I need to work with this person. They are the go-to person that I need to support me with X, Y, and Z in my business or X, Y, and Z in my life. So don't feel like you are repeating yourself and that your audience knows that you're repeating yourself. Because I promise you, there's somebody in your audience either missed it, they may have forgotten it. You're not sounding like a broken record. You feel like a broken record because you're repeating yourself over and over again, but you don't sound like one to your audience. Okay? All right. So just to do a quick recap, the 4 ways a podcast can increase your visibility and elevate your business is by creating more opportunities for you to have speaking engagements and participate in other collaborations. It helps establish your authority, which is great for getting your name out there and really demonstrating that you are the expert in your niche. It builds your community with the right people, leveraging things like podcast SEO and having the people in your audience share your podcast with others who would be the right people for your audience. And then it simplifies your funnel and your marketing. Okay, Mama, I hope that this episode, again, is just like really getting your wheels turning, especially if you've been thinking about starting a podcast. It's something that's been on your heart to do. I will be announcing a new offer soon for those mamas who are ready to start, their podcast, but maybe you're not at a point in your business where you can hire a podcast strategist to launch it for you. So keep an ear out for that. I think I'm going to be announcing it next week. Not sure yet. I have to look at my content calendar, but keep an ear out for that. Something is coming for you, especially if it's something that, again, if starting a podcast has been on your heart to do and you want to start 2024 off with a bang and adding a podcast to your business, I got something for you. So stay tuned. All right, I'll catch you in the next episode. Mama, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to hang with me. Whether you're a podcaster ready to create podcast content that attracts her dream clients, or a mama that's ready to stop the social media burnout and simplify her marketing through podcasting, I can support you. Head on over to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/connect to submit an interest form so we can chat about how I can best support you. All right, Mama, I will talk to you again soon.